We are conducting an oral history in connection with the Library of Congress and National AMVETS project. Today I'm interviewing Edward A. Herosian of 39 Fernwood Road, North Falmouth, Massachusetts. Ed was in the United States Army, and Ed,
yep.
Welcome to Post 41.
Thank you.
And we're going to try to see what kind of
Jack, where do I look?
information we can get.
Do I look anywhere? The red light or anything?
The red light. You can
Oh, anyway. Okay. Very good. Okay.
It'll just be
Good.
a plain old discussion.
Okay, fine.
Now, Ed, tell us, what branch of the service did you...
U.S. Army.
U.S. Army?
Yep.
And what part,
I was in the engineers.
You were combat engineers?
Combat engineers.
Did you know Haig Hartunian, for instance, who was in the Normandy invasion?
I knew him, yeah.
Did you serve with him?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And when were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
And why did you go in?
I was drafted, and I went in because it just seemed like that was the thing to do in those days. I couldn't have stayed out. I could have, because my two brothers that already were in service, and I could have stayed out, but instead I decided to go in.
And how did you feel about the war? Did you feel that you were going to have to go in anyway, and that's why you went in, or did you go in out of any feelings of patriotism?
I don't know. I really don't know how I felt about that. I really don't. We're too young. You know, we were patriotic, but we were too young. I was just turned 18, in fact. Yeah. I was 18.
And you hadn't had any war experience?
Oh, no.
You hadn't had any Army experience?
No, not at all.
So you went in as a cold, young civilian?
Yes, but my brother Rocky, my oldest brother, was already in the service since 1939, and he was, I thought, yeah, Byron.
So he had been in the service for how many years before
He'd been in the
joined?
service 3 years before I joined, and he was already in Africa, 1943, and he was already, in fact, I think I sort of followed him.
Did he
and
serve
my brother
under
George. No, he served 82nd Airborne.
82nd
He was in Gavin, yeah.
Okay.
I was under
Correspond with him regularly?
Oh, well, only when before I went into service. After I went into service, it was very difficult to correspond with him. He was in different areas of the theater of operations. I was in a different theater of operations. I was in the European theater of operations. I was attached when I went. In fact, when I first went into service, right after basic training, they sent me to the University of Nebraska. And I was in an engineering course over there as a prelude to it was the ASTP program. I don't know.
What does ASTP stand for?
That's the Army Specialized Training Program. And that was something, and this is interesting because I just found out just recently what the whole purpose of the ASTP program was.
Tell us.
Do you want to hear it?
Yes.
Okay. During the beginning of the war, there were a lot of young men were being killed.
Yeah.
And they were losing young men that had high mental abilities, their leadership abilities and all. They were losing these. So they wanted to, and I think the Secretary of War at that time was Vincent. Mm-hmm. They wanted to
Carl Vincent, he was Secretary of War.
Yeah, exactly.
Matter of fact, there's an aircraft carrier
named after
Carl
right.
Vincent, right. Okay.
They decided that they would take all certain military men that had a certain IQ. You had to have an IQ of over, I think it was like 139, 140.
Yes.
And over that, and they would send you to these colleges and academic institutions to get you trained for leadership. Leadership meaning right out of the school, you got into OCS, and you became officers and high non-commissioned officers. Unfortunately, the war, I was sent to the University of Nebraska. I took up engineering. I have an associate degree in engineering there because it's an accelerated course. And what happened was the war was progressing at such a rate that they were losing men, and they took all the ASTP program, 250,000 American soldiers, sailors, Marines, and all. Navy was sent to different colleges, Marines were sent in, and they were thrown back into the mix again to be part of the operations of getting ready for D-Day.
Okay.
And this is something I just found out recently, Greg, about this ASTP program. Actually, we should have stayed in the schools. See, instead they took us out and they put us right overseas. I went right overseas out of school.
Well, now you went in March of 1943.
43, right.
And Germany was not defeated until April of 1945.
That's right.
So you did see some combat.
Oh, yes,
what
I
I'm
did.
going to try to do is
Yeah.
to be a little concise here and say that you received 4 battle stars.
Right.
And that you were in the American theater, the European theater in North France.
Yep. Northern France.
Northern France.
Ardennes, the Ardennes
Okay.
Theater of Operations. Yeah.
And in the Asia Pacific.
Yep.
And the Philippine Campaign Liberation.
They sent me over there right after the war in Europe was over.
That
because
is a
I was a specialist.
Okay.
I was a bridge builder.
Tell us how
Yeah.
you attain. Tell us how what you did to get 4 battle stars. Let's
Well,
start with that. First,
Yeah.
second, third, and fourth.
Well, I was in the right after D-Day. I was when I went to. Let me prelude that.
Were you in on D-Day?
No, not on D-Day.
Okay. How soon after?
Right, 3 weeks after.
3 weeks.
Yep.
Did you go on to Omaha Beach?
I went on to Omaha Beach. I was with the 4th Armored Division. We were with the 3rd Army, 4th Armored Division, and we were a combat engineer outfit specializing in bridges. I was a Bailey Bridge master. That was my MO.
Now, a Bailey Bridge.
Master.
Describe what a Bailey Bridge
Bailey
is.
Bridge is just like your Tinker Toys. You put the bridge together. It's all parts, and you push it over a river or an embankment or something for armored or personnel to go across.
And this is to transport goods and material
Everything.
over places where there aren't any bridges.
No
or where they've
roads
been blown
either.
up.
No roads either.
No roads.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
So, when I went to England, the first thing they assigned me to was SHAEF headquarters in Plymouth. And I was with the Fort General headquarters. I think that's what it was. But there I was assigned to an engineer outfit, English outfit that was teaching us about Bailey Bridges. Bailey Bridge is an English invention. The English Army used it.
Okay.
And we needed the training for that, how to put these bridges across. And that's where, and then I went to this combat engineer outfit and attached, then they assigned me to the 3rd Army with this engineer outfit. And I went over across. I went off to Omaha Beach.
Tell us, how big is a Bailey Bridge?
Bailey Bridge can be anywhere up to 280 feet long, depending on the back end. What it is nothing more than a cantilevered structure that rolls across on rollers, and you put it together in sections, and you put it and you roll it across like that, and you drop the point down on the other side. See?
And these do not exceed 280 some odd feet?
Yeah,
Can they be connected one with another?
oh yeah, sure.
So you can make them as long as you want?
Yeah, they can. Well, we made the longest floating Bailey Bridge during the war, and that was across the Rhine River.
What do they float on?
Pontoons.
So you can put pontoons on
Right,
them
and you
connect them together.
connect them together, and you just keep going.
And how heavy is it? And how heavy equipment can go on a Bailey Bridge?
Oh, you can get tanks. We had all kinds of tanks and
Sherman
everything.
tanks?
Oh, sure.
A number of them?
Shermans, yeah, number. You can go right across.
And you did
It's
the
not one
Rhine
at a
River?
time. We did the Rhine River, and but the most notable one I was involved in was the Moselle River crossing, and that was a very tough assignment.
Why was it so tough?
Well, the Germans had 88s across the river, across from the Moselle River. They had 88s, and every time we'd put the nose of the Bailey across, they'd knock it off. They zeroed in on it and knocked it off. So we were actually working in trenches that with the tank bulldozers had dug, and as we were pushing the Baileys across, they'd knock them off. And a little historical note: I was fined $25 by General Patton himself for not having my helmet on.
Oh, really?
Now, my head has an unusual shape, maybe, I don't know. But the helmet wouldn't stay. It used to hit my nose here all the time. So I used to wear it backwards. But then when we were working, because I was in the thing, that damn thing kept falling off, so all I had was my knit hat on, see? The next thing I knew, there was a major comes down, and he says, "What's your name, Sergeant?" And I says, "Why? Who the you know, the typical, typical Army talk." I said, "Who wants to know?" And he says, "That man up there." And I looked up, and there's General Patton in his shiny OD tank with his stars right on the front. He's all dressed up, and he's standing like this. And he had his two pearl-handled pistols like that, and he's looking down at me like that, and he's pointing that because I didn't have a helmet on. So he fined me $25, which, by the way, I was reimbursed. But the first time I got my paycheck, when I'm doing R&R, when I got the paycheck, it showed that there was $25 deducted from my pay for not having. That was when Patton passed a lot of rules and regulations. If your rifle was dirty, it was $100. If you didn't have clean socks, it was $50. Oh yeah, it was because they were losing more men by frostbite and things like that, you know. So he wanted to make it more.
He wanted to tighten up the regulations.
Tighten up the regulations, and this is what happened.
Did you have occasion to talk to Patton about that?
No.
But you did see
him.
But
I've seen him. Oh, I saw him 3 or 4 times.
Now, didn't it seem kind of foolish to put up a Bailey Bridge while they were shooting at you? You knew they were going to knock it down.
Yeah, but that's a war. How do you think you get across there?
So you just keep on putting it?
Well, eventually they knocked it down 2 or 3 times, you know. But eventually we got across, you know, because they zeroed in where they were coming from. But those 88s were terrible. Yeah.
So tell us some of the Bailey bridges that you put up. You said you one across the Rhine, one across the Moselle River.
I can't remember them all. I can't remember. I can't remember.
So
we also did a lot of demolition work. I was a demolition expert. Munitions expert.
Was this
we used to clear off mines, and we used to go into villages to take the booby traps out, you know, from like one incident in Arlon, Belgium. I went into a church, and we were just taking not cover, but the resting area, you know, and where I was laying down on a table, and there was this big old antique clock. And I'm looking at it, and I said, "Geez, that's a nice one." And I didn't even touch it, you know. And I walked away, and you know, we got up and we moved positions. And then afterwards, I heard that the thing was blown up, and there was a booby trap in the clock.
Right in the clock.
Right in the clock itself, there was a booby trap, which they did a lot of over there. They booby trap soaps, they booby trap eggs, they booby trap steps. My lieutenant, which is a good, interesting story. It's all coming back to me now.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting how when you start talking.
It's good.
Yeah. My lieutenant, my platoon lieutenant, his name was Sobel. He came over one day and he says, and I says, you know, there's some demolitions inside that there stairwell. There was a little stairwell going into this building. I says, we'll put some markers on it so nobody gets in there. So he says, let's blow the thing up. We need the place for a command, you know. So we put a couple of charges in it, and he says, I'll take care of it. So he goes back, and he's got the detonator in his hand, and he's got the wire, and he's walking back. And as he's walking back, he steps behind a tree, and they had one behind a tree, and it blew half his ass off.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He was there.
Did he live?
Oh yeah. But it was the anti-personnel mine.
Now, what kind of munitions did you use to blow up booby traps?
Oh, C4s.
Plastic?
Yeah, plastic. Yeah.
Mostly plastic. Yeah. So they had plastic technology.
Oh sure. Oh sure. Of course. Yeah.
And you say you blew up some bridges too?
Oh yeah. We blew a bridge in Frankfurt, Germany.
Why?
They needed believe it or not, they needed the steel. They needed the steel. We blew up one of the most expensive railroad cranes in Frankfurt, Germany. Blew the thing, dropped it down, just so they could have the steel I-beams. Because see, we had to, it was like, you know, you're building things and you have to get what's there available. Another thing that we did add accidentally, the longest gin pole. Do you know what a gin pole is?
No.
A gin pole is a pole on a pivot, and it runs, there's two of them. There's one up here, and there's one down here that goes up and down like that. It was a gin pole. It used to go up and it goes up and down to pick up equipment or something, boats and all from the water, from the Rhine River. Okay. That thing there was just up like this here. It had been brought up and it stayed there. And I happened to be in the place, in the control room there, and it's nothing. It's got big gears and everything, cables and all that. And I happened to throw a lever. I said, I wonder what the heck this lever does. And I threw this lever, and that gin pole went right down like that, and it went down so fast it broke. Now the gin pole, I found out afterwards, was over 120 years old. It was the longest gin pole, 180 feet maybe, I'm trying to think, long. It was a log, you know, it was a big, big tree that they made it out of.
So
and I broke it.
Pole.
Yeah, it was a wooden pole. I broke it.
All right. Okay.
Inadvertently.
Tell me something about what you did in the Philippines. You say you're in the Philippines?
Yeah, when that war was over in Europe, I ended up in Austria, Linz, Austria. And that's where the Third Army ended up. I was a front troops there with the Third Army.
This is Patton's Army.
Patton's Army. And I was on occupation duty for about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks.
Where about?
In Linz, Austria. Yeah, I met the Russians over there, too. Okay. We met Russian soldiers. Now, they took us,
what
they
did you
gave
think
us...
of the Russians then?
You know, I'll be honest with you. It was just, you can't remember too much. It wasn't
like...
like...
You know whether you hated them or you liked them?
Or... Oh, no. Of course we liked them because they were our allies.
Did
you know, we don't know.
suspect them or anything?
No, nothing like that.
Did they try to proselytize
Greg,
communism to you?
No, Greg, let me tell you something. How old were we?
You were young.
We were young. We know nothing.
Were they young?
Sure they were. They were all young. In fact, they were woman soldiers. Now that I remember, there was a whole bunch of women soldiers, and there was an anti-aircraft outfit. There was an anti-aircraft outfit that we bumped into, right. And they were all woman soldiers, Russian woman soldiers.
But they weren't talking about communism and
no,
the great
nothing like that.
So
they
forth.
were just happy to see us. We swapped stuff. I saw them for maybe 2 or 3 days. You know, we swapped things together. I gave them candy bars. What else? Gave them sea rations. You know, and
okay. So how did you get from? How did you get from Lynchburg to the Philippines?
Linz, Austria.
Linz, Austria.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. They put us on trains. And you know what kind of trains? You've probably heard the 40 and 8 from World War I.
Yes.
Same trains. The same trains, 40 and 8, only we were all soldiers. We were all troops. We went all the way to Marseille with this here. We ended up in Marseille.
Explain to us what a 40 and 8 is. I
know
I've heard about it.
All right, in World War I, a 40 and 8, they put 8 horses and 40 men in a boxcar. That's the way it was done. That's why they called it 40 and 8. But they still had these trains, just narrow gauge trains. They still had these trains in France, and they shipped us from Linz, Austria, all the way down. And we're going with this train, and you know we stop for peak calls, you know, and stuff like that. And
were any of these trains used, to your knowledge, for removing the Jews from Germany to?
Oh, I don't know. All I know, I would tell you this though. One of my experiences was going into Mauthausen. Mauthausen was a concentration camp. We were one of the first troops into Mauthausen. When we went in there, we saw all the bodies and all. But you see, all the concentration camps, Greg, were split. Part of the concentration camp had slave labor, which were labor from different countries, and they were like prisoners, but they were laborers. Then there was the other part that was the concentration camp where the exterminations were taking place. Mauthausen was notorious for that, you know. I went into Mauthausen and I did a little story, Armenians in Mauthausen. There were Russian Armenians from Armenia, Russian troops or Russian people that were in there, and they ran the whiskey business. They used to make whiskey out of potatoes, and there must have been at least 150, 100, maybe 200 in these different barracks, and I found them by accident. And what happened was I was going through with a couple of my buddies, and we're looking, to see what we can see, and I heard some words, like Armenian words, and I went in and I knocked, and I looked at them, and they looked Armenian. But, they were prisoners. They were actually slave laborers. So I started talking. I says, and you remember what we used to say when we were kids? Hayek,
Yes.
And I said, next thing you know, they were all couldn't understand. They're looking at me. I'm a sergeant in a military, American uniform and all, and with the troops that going in there. They couldn't believe that I was an Armenian in an American uniform. They never even heard of it.
Yes.
They never even heard of it.
Now these were prisoners.
These were prisoners, slave labor.
But you had liberated them?
We had liberated, yeah. When we liberated Mauthausen, they were liberated. And that's how I found out. And then next thing you know, out comes the irache, the booze that they made. They were the business people of the camp. They stole the bread, and they made the bread, the whiskey, everything. If you needed something, you had to go to the Armenians to get something.
Okay.
They were the actual people to deal with.
We have about 10 minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's get going to the Philippines.
Okay. When I left Marseille, I was on the General John Pope. It was a troop ship. They gave us all new uniforms, all right, summer uniforms, everything. They took away all our clothes and they put us all new uniforms, and we thought we were going to march down Times Square, in New York.
Yes.
So everybody's happy. 4,500 troops on that ship, and all of them were all veterans of the European campaign, decorated, everything. It didn't matter. The point was that we all thought we were going to be landing in New York. We're out at sea, out through the Atlantic. We go through the Panama Canal.
Yes.
Oh, Jesus, what's this going on? Well, most of the guys are from the West Coast, so we're going to land in San Francisco.
Yes.
So we go through the Panama Canal. Next thing you know, we're heading out to sea. And what we're doing, we ended up...
This is continually on the General John Pope.
On John Pope. I ended up landing in Manila. That was it. We went right by Eniwetok Island, right by the Hawaiian Island.
Yeah.
Went right by it. By that time, everybody was... It was just like a madhouse on that ship.
They were bullshit.
Oh, they were bullshit. Everybody was just... It was a madhouse. It was a madhouse because everybody had enough. You see, in those days, all you needed was 80 points to go home. Points means how many combat missions you were in, what kind of designated, if you got wounded, if you got this, if you got that. But I had over that. I had over the required amount, so I should never have been going over there. But they said, you're a specialist, you're a Bailey Bridge expert, you're going to teach them over there so when they invade Japan, they'll know what to do. This is why we went there.
When you entered Manila, was the fighting over?
No, they were still up in the
fighting?
Oh, up in the Linguayan Gulf.
They were?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. In fact, we went up there. They sent us up there for reviewing, just to look and see what the conditions were, what we'd be faced with and everything else. And but they were still there. And then right after they dropped the atom bomb, of course, and both of them, Nagasaki and all, they put us on some LSTDs. 56 of them, and we went to Japan. I ended up in Yokohama as occupation troop. I ended up there in September, if I remember right, maybe 11th or 12th. I was one of the first ones in Yokohama, and that's where I ended, and I was on occupation duty there. But going up, this is an interesting story. Going up on these LSTDs, we hit a typhoon. Now, if you know what an LSTD is, it's a flat-bottom boat.
Yes.
They carried.
Yes.
And they broke up. A lot of them broke up. They lost a lot of men. And in fact, if you look through your historical records, you'll probably find records that Congress even investigated that they shouldn't have been.
What is an LSTD as opposed to an LST?
LST is the landing craft.
Landing ship tank.
Landing ship tank. That one drops down in the front.
Right.
The other one is troops, and it opens and you go out.
Okay.
The other one, you go up to the beach and you drop. The other one just opens and you go up to a dock like and it opens out.
Is this also what they call a Higgins boat?
No, Higgins is a small boat.
Small boat.
Yeah, that's
These
a small.
are large ones.
These are big.
Yeah.
They had hundreds
All right,
of men.
so when you
I was in Yokohama, in Japan.
Yokohama, can you describe any damage that you saw?
Oh, yeah. Well, I went to Tokyo. And I want to tell you something. This is a very interesting story. Japan, when we went there, was totally different than what you can imagine today, or even 6 months after, or even 3 months after we landed in Japan. Because MacArthur, because what happened was the American soldiers went there and the Japanese looked at them like conquerors. You know what that means in Japanese, a conqueror? You are entitled to anything you want. We went into the Ginza in Tokyo. We went to buy, we're looking for souvenirs. You couldn't pay. They wouldn't take the money. And everybody bows down, everybody. You walk up the sidewalk in the street, they'd all go on the curb. They'd all walk over like this here. The whole people, you see a whole wave of people going over there. So you can walk by like this here. That's the way it was when the troops first landed in Japan. And what happened was MacArthur recognized that these troops were really, American troops. They can take advantage of any situation.
Yes, of course.
And they were taking advantage of the Japanese people, so he passed the rules that you didn't have to do this, you didn't have to do that. It was all part of that Constitution of the Japanese that he made. He wrote the Constitution for the Japanese people, okay? So he acted basically as the conqueror, as the emperor. But that's what happened. And before you know it, it was right back to the way things are and everywhere else. You had to obey everything.
Was the devastation in Yokohama mostly incendiary, or was it just blast?
Yokohama was a lot of incendiary. My job there was, I was in charge of troops that were guarding the warehouses. That was my job at that point. I was with a troop group.
How long did you stay in Manila?
In Manila, I was there until September. September maybe. I think I landed in Japan September 11th or 12th. So it takes about maybe 6, 7 days to get up there by the boat.
Okay, so you didn't spend any long time in
No, I spent
but you did see combat there.
Yeah, June, well, we saw combat, but we weren't in it. You know what I mean? We were observers of what was going on so we could train the airborne groups. That's what our job was in the Philippines, was to train, and I think it was the 17th Airborne Group, train them how to put bridges, or what to do in the event of, it was a whole new army being formed for the invasion of Japan. See?
When you got out of the service, was it from Japan that you got out of the service?
I got out of there from Japan, yeah. They brought me, took a boat, went to Seattle, Washington, that's where I landed. And from Seattle, Washington, I came home.
How did you feel about the service?
Oh, I never minded
Feel
the
they
service.
treated you good?
Oh, sure, I never mind. Hey, I went to the GI Bill. I went to the University of Miami. I'm an architect. I got my education, which I never would have gotten before. We were all poor people, Armenian immigrants. How many people went to college back in the 30s?
So your military education and your GI Bill helped you in your present
Oh,
job.
absolutely.
Anything else that you'd like to say with regard to your... I know that you have a long record here.
Yeah. Well,
4 battles. Were all the 4 battle stars that you win, were they in the within the European
European theater? Right. European
so,
theater.
Because when you went to Japan, it was just before the atom bomb.
Yeah.
Did you have
There was one of the battle stars, and I really got 5 battle stars, and I put 4 down because the 4 were the European, but they gave me a battle star for that observation time in the Philippines, because I was in a battle zone.
You're in the battle zone.
Yeah, so that's what happened there.
Okay. Well, if that's it, we'll terminate the interview here.
Sure.
And thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And
What's this going to be all about now, Greg? Tell me, explain to me one more time.
The project involves the Library of Congress and AMVETS National, wherein they will have your oral history transmitted to first the Watertown Veterans Council, a copy to the Watertown Library, a copy to the Library of Congress, a copy to AMVETS National, and we're going to give you a copy too.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so.
And the Watertown Veterans Council will be financing the whole operation.
Very good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
There's your hat.
Next.
Who's next? Thanks, Jack.
I'll get the mic over.
Oh, yeah, take that. Yeah.
Hey, you welcome.